He had the second longest path there, only behind Michael Bisping. He never played character, fake, or wore a funny hat to get attention. You simply trained hard, showed up, and fought with all your heart. And they gave us some of the greatest fights in our sport's history. Dude, I don't know, I'm about to get emotional.
Wow, you guys, seeing Dustin the Diamond Poirier read those goddamn letters, seeing him get emotional, seeing him get choked up is getting me choked up, my people. You guys, we're just a couple days away now from really actually seeing Dustin the Diamond Poirier fight for the goddamn last time, my people. And not just that, the significance in this weekend with Dustin retiring. When it comes to me, you guys, if you guys didn't know, Dustin Poirier and the Korean Zombie UFC on Fuel TV #3 was the first fight that I've ever seen in MMA in my life, my people. Hey, if it wasn't for watching Dustin Poirier and that Korean Zombie fight, don't get me wrong, I know Korean Zombie won that fight, but if I would have never ever set my eyes on that fight at 13 years old, I would have never found love with the sport of UFC, my people. And Manny Pacquiao, man, I don't even want to talk about what Manny Pacquiao has did for my life, dude. I mean, he's the first boxer that I've ever seen in my whole entire life. I remember being 10 years old when he fought against Oscar De La Hoya. My family's the type of family that gets together. They get together for boxing fights, not the Super Bowl, not NFL Sunday. They get together for UFC and boxing fights as I was growing up, my friends. And dude, I remember seeing Pacquiao the first goddamn time against Oscar De La Hoya. I didn't watch the co-main event. I didn't watch none of that. I was still young and running around the house. But when I seen all the family get together and get hyped up for this fight, I went to go put my eyes on the TV. And that's when my life changed, my friends. Manny Pacquiao is the reason why I fell in love with boxing, why I did boxing myself, why I wanted to become a boxer. And honestly, it gets deeper than that, dude. I think he honestly saved me from a lot of bad times in my life. You know, I think there's a lot of times, for instance, there was a time when all of my buddies were getting ready to bust a lick. We were getting ready to rob some house. I remember my mom told me that night that if I wanted to do boxing, that all I had to do was stay home for that day. If I stayed home that day, she was going to put me in boxing the next day. And I remember seeing Manny Pacquiao and seeing that I just wanted to do it so goddamn bad. So I stayed home. And the next day I went to the gym. It turned out all my friends got busted and got locked up. You guys, there's been numerous amount of times when I could have been in bad situations, but because seeing Manny Pacquiao giving me the love that I got for boxing, it's taken me to where we at now. You guys are watching me. You guys are also UFC and boxing fans. I'm sure you guys also have your own fighters who you guys grew up watching in your own eras that made you love the sport and just gave you some of the best feelings as a youngin' growing up, my people. Today's video is going to be specifically talking about Dustin Poirier and Manny Pacquiao, man. And I want to start off with Dustin Poirier. Like I said, man, he was the first fighter that I ever watched fight on TV in MMA, my friends. I believe it was, May 15th of 2012. I was barely 13 years old. You had Dustin Poirier in the main event versus the Korean Zombie at a time when I believe main events wasn't even a thing. I think they had barely started putting 5-rounders in main events. Not main events was even a thing. Of course main events was even a thing. This was the first time that they ever put 5-rounders in main events, my friends. So as we came into this Korean Zombie versus Dustin Poirier, everybody's all excited. It's going to be a 5-round main event. You know, the Korean Zombie in those days before he had to go to Korea and go serve his time in his country and kind of got him distracted from his career, he was a goddamn savage. And Dustin Poirier, my guys, this dude has been fighting. Like I said, I was 13 years old when Dustin Poirier fought against Korean Zombie. I'm 27 years old now. You guys, Dustin Poirier has created some of the greatest moments in UFC history, some of the greatest fights that we've ever seen. This is a man who honestly is somebody we could relate to. You know, he didn't get to win that world title. I know he's the interim lightweight world champion when he beat Max Holloway for the second fight, But I know, he had 3 different occasions to win the world title and he couldn't do it. But, you guys, he never, ever gave up. He kept on fighting like a warrior. This wasn't a goddamn guy who came in there with shenanigans, hairdos, was trying to be a fake person for clout. This was Diamond Dustin Poirier, my friends. What about that fight with Max Holloway? Like I just said, he's fighting Max Holloway this Saturday for the 3rd fight. That 2nd fight with Max Holloway, you guys, was a goddamn barn burner.
When you've been in fights like this with Justin Gates, Poirier's coming with it. Oh my goodness, these boys are going at it.
Holloway's volume now.
Holloway pouring it on. Oh,
Flying
beautiful knee to the body.
He goes in there and just lights Max Holloway up, man. Max Holloway's landing his little pity punches every now and then. But Dustin the Diamond Poirier went in there and displayed absolutely amazing boxing, getting it done. And do you guys remember the feeling, the excitement that Dustin the Diamond Poirier, after beating Max Holloway and becoming the interim champion, finally getting his bout? If you don't remember, check this out.
After 5 rounds, we go to the judges' scorecards for a decision. All 3 judges score this contest 49-46 for the winner by unanimous decision and new interim UFC lightweight champion of the world, Dustin the Diamond Poirier.
I can't believe that this is coming to an end, my friends. What about Dustin Poirier when he fought against Dan Hooker? That was one of my most favorite fights of Dustin Poirier. Why? Because, guys, this wasn't in a stadium. This was at the UFC Apex during the COVID times, during times when they were putting fights in the Apex because they didn't want to have a big crowd in the stadium. So because of that, you could hear every single goddamn punch. If you guys have not watched Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker, please go watch it. You could hear every single punch that Dustin landed and Dan landed. And I say to this day, man, I think this is one of the most brutal fights that Dustin Poirier has been in and put anybody in my life, dude. You had Dan Hooker go in there in the first 2 rounds, do a good boxing, land some great punches. But from the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round, Dustin Poirier started to take it over, my friends. And dude, you seen in the 4th round when Dustin was bombing on him, getting him in that arm bar. Dan Hooker was having to fight guillotines, arm bars, relentless punches, to the point where once that bell rang in the 4th round, Dan Hooker had to stay on the floor for a couple, literally 10 seconds before he could even get up and walk back to his corner because what Dustin was doing to him. And you guys remember in the end of the 5th round when that fight ended, Dustin Poirier went to go sit back in his stool and you had Dan Hooker being treated. He couldn't even sit on the stool. He was sitting on the floor and you had Dustin Poirier walk up over there and tell him, "What's up, Dan? What's up, man? Hey, you guys." That was just proof and just it shows you how much of a goddamn dog Dustin Poirier was. The man from Louisiana representing the United States, bro. It was absolutely amazing. Those 3 fights were amazing. And I want to talk about the Conor McGregor one. What about Conor McGregor? You guys, they fought before. This was a rematch. Conor McGregor at 145 pounds when he fought Dustin Poirier was an absolute savage. One of the best 145 pounders that we ever seen. He went in there against the Dustin Poirier and knocked him out, dude. Brutal fashion. Dustin, during this time, was able to come back and get a couple wins on his notches. Conor McGregor also became just a super rising star. They ended up having the 2nd fight, my friends. And dude, for Conor McGregor to go in there against Dustin Poirier, this was a bigger Conor McGregor. The hype was on Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier goes in there and absolutely sleeps Conor McGregor in round 2 in brutal fashion. My people, puts him to sleep. You guys, during that time, we had never seen Conor McGregor just put to sleep like that. I mean, hey, that win single-handedly was one of the greatest wins, just like when Nate Diaz beat Conor McGregor, man. It was out of this world. When Dustin beat Conor McGregor, absolutely phenomenal win. Bro, I can't believe it's coming to a goddamn end when you see Dustin and every single goddamn memory that he's put into UFC. The memories that he's given us. Korean Zombie, the reason why I love UFC. What he did to Conor McGregor. All these guys giving Khabib a tough match, giving Islam Makhachev the toughest match, the toughest fight that Islam Makhachev has ever had in his career, other than Volkanovski, my friends. Hey, you guys, the fact that Dustin Poirier was the first fighter that I ever watched at 13 years old, and now I'm 27, it makes me sad, bro. It makes me sad. And I know if you're a Dustin Poirier fan out there, you guys can relate, man. And there's another reason why this weekend is so significant to me, bro. Manny Pacquiao, like I told you guys, bro. Oscar De La Hoya, seeing that fight, what he did to Ricky Hatton, knocking him out in 2 rounds when it took Floyd 9 rounds, my friend. Seeing what he did to Antonio Margarito. This was a guy who went from 107 pounds all the way to 154 pounds. This was Antonio Margarito who put cement in his goddamn gloves and he fought against Miguel Cotto, my friends. Pacquiao went up to 154 pounds in Dallas, Texas, and took on Margarito. And what did he do to him? He beat the crap out of him. He beat the crap out of him, dude. In and out. 10 punch combinations, you guys. Some of the other greatest victories that I got of Manny Pacquiao. What about his fights with Marco Antonio Barrera? Marco Antonio Barrera, one of the greatest Mexican warriors that we had at the time. What about Eric Morales? You guys. You know, Pacquiao went in there in that first Eric Morales fight and lost in an absolute great goddamn fight. And he comes back in the second and the third fight and brutalizes Eric Morales, my friends. Those fights were so iconic, dude, because he lost that fight and came back. And I'll never forget the words that he had with Eric Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera. Some of the greatest fights to this day, to this goddamn day, my friends. What about the quadrilogy, the quadruple fights that he had with Juan Manuel Marquez? You guys, I still say to this day that Juan Manuel Marquez beating Manny Pacquiao was single-handedly one of the greatest Mexican wins in Mexican sports history, my friends. It was like when Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. beat Magic Taylor, my friends. It was absolutely huge. Now, I still think when it comes to Manny Pacquiao's career, and as one of Manny Pacquiao's biggest fans, man, I loved Pacquiao growing up, dude. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be in love with the sport of boxing. I thought that it just meant perfectness for his career, you guys, because look, he came in there against Marquez and beat him in all the first 3 fights, knocking down Marquez in the first fight 3 different times. The second fight being super close. That first fight was close too, don't get me wrong. Now the third fight, I do think Juan Manuel Marquez won that fight, but they gave it to Pacquiao. So all these last 3 times, Marquez was ever able to get his shot. In the 4th fight, what he did to Pacquiao. Now, during those times, Manny Pacquiao was dealing with his divorce problems with his wife, Jinky. They were going through a lot of things. I think what happened between Marquez and Pacquiao in that 4th fight was the best thing to happen to Pacquiao. He set his life straight after that. He got his relationship back together. He stopped doing drugs. He stopped doing the rooster fighting, all this. He stopped sleeping with other women, my friends, and he started paying attention more to God. And I always say to this day, one of the other greatest wins of Manny Pacquiao was the fight after he got knocked out by Juan Manuel Marquez when he came back and beat the crap out of Brandon Rios. What about when he came back and beat the crap out of Brandon Rios, my friends? You guys remember Brandon Rios was talking the most shit, saying he was going to retire him, saying that Manny Pacquiao ain't nothing, this and that. And what did Pacquiao do to him? He cleaned him, bro. He absolutely swept them. If anything, he won every single round and brutalized my boy, my friends. What about Manny Pacquiao versus Timothy Bradley 2? I remember being at a party for Manny Pacquiao versus Timothy Bradley 1, and my stepdad had put a bet against one of his buddies, right? This buddy, right when the bell rang for the end of the 12th round, his buddy had already paid my dad because he knew that Manny Pacquiao won that fight. He paid him his money already. And then here we come to the announcements. When he announces that Manny Pacquiao lost that fight, and Timothy Bradley won the fight. Homie comes running from around the corner. He's like, hey, give me back my money. Give me back my money. You guys, it was a shocker. People were already paying people money because everybody thought Pacquiao won, and they gave Timothy Bradley the fight. So that's why I say number 2 was so goddamn important, because he comes in there against Timothy Bradley in his second fight and beats the living shit out of him. It beats the crap out of Timothy Bradley, Desert Storm, my friends, and redeems himself. You guys, Manny Pacquiao's career is just so goddamn amazing, and it's brought me so many goddamn amazing times. When he beat Keith Thurman, what about when he beat Adrian Boner? I remember those moments when Keith Thurman was at that little question thing where they were asking Keith Thurman, like, how does it feel to be fighting Manny Pacquiao? And Keith Thurman was like, what, that fool with his T-Rex arms? Well, this is all he does. This is all Manny Pacquiao does. Watch. And what do you do? Pacquiao goes in there in the first round and puts Keith Thurman on his ass. You guys. This guy has created fights around the world, not just for me, but I'm pretty sure for the people who are watching this too, that you guys can absolutely appreciate. When he got knocked out by Marquez, I remember seeing my whole family bounce around everywhere. My family's Mexican, man. Their fans jumping around everywhere. They're grabbing me. They're pushing me. I remember everybody like, ah! I went home that night and I went home to cry, dude. I remember I love Pacquiao so goddamn much, dude, that I sat down outside of my porch. I sat in the chair and I started crying, my friends. You guys, the significance and the importance of this weekend, having Manny Pacquiao come back, competing for a 147 bout against a champion in Mario Barrios, and seeing Dustin Poirier retire. These are 2 fighters that started me off in this combat world, my friends. It's going to be an emotional one. It's going to be an emotional one, my fans. Hey, I would like for you guys to leave a comment and give me a story. Give me one of your guys' favorite fighters that you guys ever had, something that you guys could relate to. You know, I know Manny Pacquiao and Dustin Poirier aren't your guys' specific, first fighters that you ever watched. But let me know in the comments who is, my friends. I can't wait for this goddamn weekend. My name is Alex Ramos. And let's go, man. Let's go.